The British Empire was one of the most powerful and extensive empires in human history. It spanned across continents, affecting millions of people and cultures. While some argue that the empire brought progress, infrastructure, and modernization to its colonies, others believe it was a force of exploitation, destruction, and inequality. This video will explore the good, the bad, and the often overlooked stories of the British Empire. The global reach of the British Empire. The British Empire was not just large, it was enormous. At its peak, it controlled around 25% of the world's land and more than 400 million people. From the Caribbean to Africa, Asia to Australia, and North America, the British had a hand in shaping the history of many nations. One of the most significant legacies of the empire was the spread of the English language. Today, English is the global language of business, science, and diplomacy, and it has its roots in British colonization. Countries like India, Nigeria, Kenya, and Canada still use English as one of their official languages, a result of centuries of British rule. Apart from language, the British Empire also left behind systems of governance. In many former colonies, the British introduced systems of law, parliamentary democracy, and education. Countries like India, South Africa, and Australia adopted legal systems and administrative practices that were directly influenced by British models. For example, India, under British rule, saw the introduction of a modern railway system. The British constructed over 65,000 kilometres of railways across India, one of the largest networks in the world. While these railways were primarily built to move raw materials for British industries, they also connected remote areas, making transportation and communication more efficient across the subcontinent. In addition to railways, the British built infrastructure like roads, ports, and bridges in various colonies. These developments helped stimulate trade and connect regions that were previously isolated from each other. However, it's important to remember that these developments were often for the benefit of the British economy and not necessarily for the well-being of the local population, the economic exploitation of colonies. While the British Empire did leave behind some infrastructure, it also brought significant economic exploitation. The British Empire was built on the extraction of resources from its colonies, from raw materials like cotton, tea, rubber, and gold, to human labour in the form of slavery and indentured servitude. The empire took vast amounts of wealth from its colonies. One of the most well-known examples of economic exploitation is India. India was often referred to as the jewel in the crown of the British Empire because of its vast wealth and resources. The British took advantage of this by heavily taxing Indian farmers and industries. They forced India to produce goods for export to Britain, often at the expense of local industries. For instance, India once had a thriving textile industry, but under British rule, the British imposed heavy tariffs on Indian textiles and flooded the market with cheap British manufactured goods. This caused the collapse of the local textile industry, which had been a significant source of income and employment for millions of Indians. The British also introduced a system of land revenue collection in India that led to the impoverishment of many Indian farmers. The British demanded high taxes, regardless of the crop yields or weather conditions. When farmers were unable to pay these taxes, their land was confiscated and many were forced into poverty. Case study: the Bengal famine, 1943. One of the most tragic examples of economic exploitation is the Bengal famine of 1943. During World War II, while Britain was fighting the Axis powers, millions of people in Bengal starved to death. British officials, including Winston Churchill, prioritized food supplies for the war effort, leading to the diversion of rice from Bengal to other parts of the empire. Despite widespread hunger, British authorities refused to intervene, and millions of Indians perished in what is now considered one of the worst famines in modern history. The famine was exacerbated by British policies that prioritized economic control over the welfare of the local population. The social and cultural impact. The British Empire also had a lasting impact on the social and cultural fabric of its colonies. The British imposed their own way of life on the people they ruled, often disregarding local cultures, languages, and traditions. British colonial administrators and missionaries believed in the superiority of Western civilization, and they sought to civilize the indigenous populations. In India, for example, the British introduced English education, which, while offering some opportunities, also led to the marginalization of traditional knowledge and local languages. The British established schools and universities that taught British history, literature and values, often at the expense of indigenous knowledge systems. The British also encouraged the spread of Christianity in many of their colonies. Missionaries were active in regions like Africa and India, where they built churches, schools, and hospitals. While some of their work led to positive changes, it also contributed to the erosion of local religions and cultures. Case study: the Partition of India, 1947. One of the most controversial aspects of British colonial rule was the Partition of India in 1947. The British, in an effort to quickly leave India after World War II, decided to divide the country into two separate nations, India and Pakistan. This decision was made without proper planning and without considering the deep religious, cultural, and ethnic divisions within the subcontinent. The partition led to widespread violence and the displacement of millions of people. The resulting conflict between Hindus and Muslims caused the deaths of over 1 million people, and it left deep scars in the relationship between India and Pakistan that persist to this day. Resistance and rebellion. While many aspects of British rule were exploitative and oppressive, it is important to recognize the resistance and rebellion that arose against the empire. People from all over the world fought against British rule, often at great cost. Case study: the Indian Rebellion of 1857. One of the earliest and most significant revolts against British rule was the Indian Rebellion of 1857, also known as the Sepoy Mutiny. Indian soldiers, sepoys, in the British East India Company's army rebelled against British officers due to a combination of social, cultural, and military grievances. The rebellion spread across northern and central India, but it was eventually crushed by British forces. Although the rebellion was suppressed, it marked the beginning of a larger movement for Indian independence. Leaders like Mahatma Gandhi, Jawaharlal Nehru, and Subhas Chandra Bose would go on to lead India's struggle for independence, which was achieved in 1947. In Africa, the Mau Mau uprising in Kenya in the 1950s was another example of resistance. The British used brutal tactics to suppress the rebellion, including torture, mass arrests, and executions. Despite this, the Mau Mau played a crucial role in Kenya's eventual independence in 1963. The legacy of the British Empire. Today, the British Empire may have formally ended in the mid-20th century, but its legacy still influences many parts of the world today. Former British colonies often face challenges such as political instability, economic underdevelopment, and social divisions that were exacerbated by colonial rule. For example, the borders drawn by the British in Africa often ignored ethnic and cultural divisions, leading to conflict in countries like Nigeria and Sudan. Similarly, in India and Pakistan, the legacy of partition continues to fuel tensions and violence. In addition, the British Empire left behind a system of economic inequality. The wealth generated by the colonies was concentrated in the hands of a few, while the majority of people in these regions remained poor. Today, many former colonies are still dealing with the effects of this wealth gap. Conclusion. The British Empire's legacy is complex and multifaceted. It brought some positive changes like infrastructure, legal systems, and education, but it also caused immense suffering and exploitation, as well as long-lasting social and economic inequalities. The British Empire reshaped the world in ways that are still felt today, and its impact continues to be debated. What is clear is that the history of the British Empire is not just one of triumph and glory, but also one of hardship, injustice, and resistance. Understanding this legacy is important, as it helps us better understand the challenges many former colonies face today.